He weak farmer and reincarnated as awakened dragons with extraordinary powers. An ancient dragon is killed by a human and is reborn as a normal man in a quiet village. On his deathbed, chained and wounded, he reflects that he never did anything to deserve such treatment from humans. At times, this dragon had even been an ally to them, but now he suffers at their hands without justification. Despite being severely injured, the creature breaks free from the chains in his mind. Perhaps none of it matters anymore, maybe his life has simply been too long, or maybe this is an unworthy end for such an ancient divine being who has lived since the era of the gods. At this point, he only wishes for the Reapers to take his soul to the underworld so he can rest forever. Then, his life ends. We are then thrown into a scene where a baby is born under peculiar circumstances. Magaru, who oversaw the birth, believes that this newborn possesses some extraordinary talent. While the parents are enchanted as their child opens his eyes, the mother names the child Dolan and introduces him to his older brother. Years later, Dolan has grown and is helping with household tasks such as gathering supplies. One day, while working, a girl calls him to come home. Her name is Eri, and she's worried about him. She asks if something is wrong because his mind seems to wander off with the sunset view. Dolan gently strokes her hair, assures her that everything is fine, and they walk back together. The two live in Varun, a small village on the northern border of the continental kingdom of Akrist. Aware that he was a millennial dragon in his past life, Dolan now lives as a typical peasant in this humble region whose sole industry is agriculture. Every day he goes to the fields, working hard to earn his daily bread. In this village, one is considered an adult at 15, the age when peasants are expected to live on their own. Dolan left his parents' house at 16, which is how old he is now. One day while fishing, a friend asks if tomorrow is the day he's going to investigate that swamp. Dolan confirms and adds that it's been a month since the lizards disappeared from the swamp, so something must be done. The friend argues that this should be the garrison's job, not his, but Dolan counters that Captain Varun and the others are busy protecting the village. The friend asks if he's sure he doesn't want company, but Dolan declines, saying he's just going to take a look. Just then, a fish bites the bait, and a battle ensues, but Dolan emerges victorious, returning to the village with a bucket full of fish. He is praised for the great catch, though a girl thought he'd be getting ready for tomorrow. He explains that he's been preparing little by little over the past few days, and that her help in persuading the village chief and the others was invaluable. She replies that since Dolan always helps with training, it's all good. Dolan asks if Melita and Albert are training now, and Melita confirms, mentioning they'll be holding a meeting about the next children's training. Albert advises Dolan to prioritize tomorrow's investigation. That evening, Dolan prepares a fish for dinner, reflecting on the many monsters and bandits surrounding Varun, but notes there aren't enough soldiers in the village to provide the same protection one would find in a city. It's expected that the peasants themselves help protect against threats. Meanwhile, Eri reminds Dolan that it's magic practice day, and the two head off for the session at the training grounds. Dolan points his hand at a straw target and shoots a blast of energy, destroying the target and putting on quite a show. Eri is thrilled by this, and Magaru praises Dolan's offensive magic for being flawless as always. Dolan credits his master's training, and she announces it's time to practice healing magic, a type of spell where the boy struggles. At dusk, the village chief introduces Dolan to a woman named Christina, a young noblewoman who will be staying in the village for some time. The old man asks Dolan to behave in front of her because of her status. Christina greets Dolan, and their eyes meet his intense blue and her pulsing red. As she walks away, he imagines she must be quite skilled.
力の断りを。エナジーボルト。ご指導のおかげです。
紹介しよう。こちらはクリスティーナ殿。
クリスティーナという。
くれぐれも粗相のないように。
よろしく頼む。
と言います。
Afterward, Dolan returns to gathering supplies, pondering the fact that in this village, there's always the risk of freezing to death in the winter and the unbearable heat in the summer. Reflecting on this, Dolan is shocked to learn that humans live in such a hostile environment. When he arrives home, he is greeted warmly by his brother Marco and their parents. Showing off the basket full of food earns him a smile from his mother, pleased with the abundance. Naturally, dinner was ready, and everyone eat with enthusiasm. Dolan's father comments that living alone may be relaxing but also lonely, so he advises his son to find a wife, as Dylan did. However, Dolan prefers to enjoy his single life a little longer. His brother brings up the swamp Dolan will visit tomorrow, and their mother worries about the dangers he might encounter. Dolan reassures her that he's only going to take a quick look. His father adds that Dolan is an adult and can make his own decisions as long as he returns safely to ease his mother's worries. To that, Dolan is confident nothing will go wrong, and he'll even have a great story to tell. The next morning finally arrives. Captain Varun still believes he should accompany the boy on this excursion, however Melita argues that it doesn't make sense since, if the monsters attack, the village would be left without its captain. Letitia offers a simple blessing from the goddess, while Magaru warns that her fortune reading showed a small hint of something bad on this journey, so Dolan should be careful. Eri made lunch for him and hands it over. With that, Dolan bids farewell to the village and sets off on his journey. As he walks toward his destination, he finds himself thinking about how the swamp lizards used to interact with the village of Virum from time to time. However, one day they simply stopped showing up. That's when Dolan volunteered to investigate the reason. Even though he had no idea what he might find, at the end of his journey he arrived at the swamp. He placed his hand in the water, and with some form of sensory technique, he realized that the lizards could no longer survive there because the power of the earth elementals had grown too strong, while the water elemental's power was weakening. He knew very well that Lady Maguru's divinations were usually spot on, so he had to stay alert. Speaking of which, he suddenly heard noises in the woods surrounding the swamp. To survive in a place like this, whatever it was had to be a pretty tough creature, so his attention sharpened even more. Then out of nowhere, a lamia appeared in front of him. In other words, someone who was half human, half snake. It was certainly not what Dolan expected to see, but since she had appeared, it confirmed the rumors the village had spread about this creature, rumors that all spoke of her unparalleled beauty. She asked if Dolan was alone, and he confirmed it. This seemed to relieve the lamia, though she wasn't quite sure how to proceed. Maybe she should try using those seductive moves her mother had taught her so many times. She gave it a shot, but in reality, it was far from being the kind of dance that would make someone feel attracted. In fact, it had quite the opposite effect. At the end of her awkward performance, the lamia assured him she wasn't there to fight, but a gigantic creature emerging from the swamp didn't seem to share that intention. When the massive monster threatened to crush the lamia with its hand, she could only scream and brace for death. However, Dolan sliced through the opponent's wrist, stopping the tragedy from unfolding. Naturally, he pulled the woman away to escape, but the monster was determined to block their way. The girl asked what that thing was. Without answering, Dolan covered her mouth and told her to tuck in her tail, as it was sticking out from under the mushroom they were hiding beneath. After a while, the monster gave up and left them in peace.
こんなところに一人で来るなんて。うかつな人間ね。ところであなた一人だけなのかしら。
しかしなるほど。
どうしましょう。
なんだ。
人間よ。なんなんですかあれ。
Dolan then explained that the creature was a deranged earth elemental. There used to be humanoid lizards that lived in this swamp, but one day they all disappeared, and that thing was probably the reason. Dolan had heard there was an earthquake some time ago, which had likely affected the elementals. Unfortunately, there was no way to reverse what had happened. Changing the subject, he introduced himself to the lamia, who revealed her name was Celina. Dolan then asked if all lamias could use magic, and she confirmed they could. In that case, the human suggested they team up to fight the elemental, but the woman panicked. Lamias were earth creatures and wouldn't be much help against a monster of the same element, though there was one lamia spell that might work on an earth elemental. Dolan offered to go ahead while she provided support, to which Celina responded, saying she would stand by him in sickness and in health. He chuckled and asked if that wasn't something people said when they got married, to which she apologized for the slip. Then Dolan charged to the front lines while Celina wondered if she could really work with a human she had just met. Regardless, the boy gave the signal and the joint attack began. Dolan deflected the first few earth projectiles the monster threw at him, and Celina seized the opening to curse the opponent with a spell called Jirum, which summoned a colossal serpent that coiled around the enemy and bit its head. However, Celina couldn't hold this magic for long, so the human had to act fast. Knowing this, Dolan rushed at the elemental. Even though the monster managed to shake off the serpent, he dodged the new projectiles, climbed up the creature's head, imbued his sword with draconic magic, and sliced the elemental in half. With the monster defeated, its muddy body spread across the land, splattering Celina and covering her in filth. Dolan checked on her, and after confirming she was fine, extended his hand and invited her to dry off her clothes. Soon they gathered in an abandoned village and cooked a meal. Celina mentioned how the boy hadn't seemed afraid of her, and he replied that she seemed different from the lamias he knew, as they were usually more cautious of humans and, as a result, more aggressive. He then added that there weren't any lamia villages around, so he asked what she was doing in the area. She explained that when lamias turned 17, there was a rule in their species that they had to go out and find a husband, as they were an exclusively female species. Rarely did they give birth to a boy, and when they did, it was always of the father's race. Lamias had been created when a human woman was cursed, and that curse had been passed down, which is why they were part snake and had venom. As such, they needed husbands who were resistant to this substance. Even her mother had found a human husband, and the two got along very well. Listening calmly, Dolan remarked that Celina was a very adorable lamia, but she got angry, thinking he was treating her like a child. Dolan laughed at her reaction and served her a portion of food. Celina was so delighted by the taste that she worried she'd gone too far with her praise, which embarrassed her. Easing her nerves, Dolan thanked her for the compliments and mentioned that his mother had taught him how to cook. Celina observed that he smiled gently when talking about his family and suggested he must love them dearly, which triggered a memory of his old life. The solitary dragon in the cave was long gone, and he needed to accept that. At dawn, he said goodbye to Celina, and knowing that Lamias liked vital energy, he shared some of his with her. However, Celina collapsed from the intensity of the dragon's power. After the awkwardness, he helped her up and abandoned the idea. With everything settled, he invited the snake woman to visit his village once she found a husband, and the two parted ways, heading off in separate directions. This is the end of Goodbye Dragon Life Episode 1. Thank you so much for staying on this channel and watching our videos. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so we can keep you updated with our latest content. See you in the next video.